Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to start with a little bit of context. So, can you share the path that led you to crew?
Sure. Um, I started crew with my brother in 2014. Prior to that, neither of us were really in the restaurant business. I was an architect, and I had helped on the side, helped my brother start a sailing company. And we'd both started our own businesses, so we had some sense that you could just do things in the world. And we like being on boats, and we like being on the waterfront, and we like having a good time and going out drinking. And we grew up in New Orleans, where it's like the wild, wild west of debauchery. And one day, we're out sailing, and we ended up dockside drinking beers on a boat, and thinking like, the best part of being on a boat is kind of when you're done. You get back to the dock, and you sit there and have your drinks with your friends, and there's nothing really left to worry about. And right around that time, we'd ended up purchasing this huge 150-foot sailboat that we were doing tours on in New York. And I was having a birthday party for myself, and I invited, I don't know, 20 or 30 people, and hundreds of people showed up. Way more people than we could accept going out on a trip. So we ended up having this monster party dockside, and that really solidified for us, like, oh, not going anywhere and having a boat is pretty awesome. Like, you get the best of both worlds. You don't have to worry about the timing. And we thought, there's something to this. And then right after that, I read this book called The Big Oyster, which is about the oyster history of New York. It's really the history of New York as told through oysters, which were really the fundamental food that people ate here. And I don't know, on about page 20, there's a section that starts talking about how people ate oysters, which is there was these floating restaurants called oyster barges that look pretty much like a saloon. They were wrapped around all of lower Manhattan, like side to side. And I was just blown away. I thought, like, how cool is this that you would just walk up to a boat and walk inside and have a beer and have an oyster. And I really got inspired by that concept, and we decided to try and do that. So right around that time, we ended up selling the sailing company that we had, and I sold my architecture firm, and I was just teaching college, like scrapping together this idea to open a restaurant. And when I was 18 years old, I was a waiter at the Four Seasons, and that was it. That's my only experience. My dad managed restaurants and hotels when we were growing up, so I kind of saw from behind the scenes, and I witnessed firsthand a lot of restauranting, but I didn't know anything about what you're supposed to do. We went and talked to every relevant authority on the waterfront in New York City to try and figure out somewhere that we could do this, and lucked into. It was an unknown at the time because there's nothing there, but there was this spot downtown that we looked at it in the winter, and it's cold, and it's isolated, and in many ways didn't seem great, but at the same time, had an incredible view of the New York Harbor and the waterfront and downtown. And luckily, we decided to move forward with that spot. We found this old boat that we convinced someone to donate to us, and Miles and I and a handful of friends basically spent 6 weeks, day and night, restoring this boat, building out bars, building kitchens, making it like somewhat viable to operate, and opened a restaurant. Like, I think it was like the 3rd of July or something. At the time, my wife, who had worked extensively in restaurants, said, there's things that you need to know to run a restaurant. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what those are, because we don't know. And, we really went into it knowing absolutely nothing. And other than, are kind to people and welcoming, and, try and make it fun. And so, our first season, when we opened the doors, there's a line like down the pier to get inside, and that line never went away. And, we basically like held on for life for that. It was awesome. It was super fun,
Right.
but also terrifying. It's like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know you had to make a schedule. I didn't know you had to have inventory. I didn't know that you had to do payroll, like really basic stuff. Just never thought about it. And, we learned 100% on the fly. Luckily, we had interviewed, we were looking for a chef, and my brother's, well, it's his wife now, but his girlfriend at the time knew this guy. who happened to have started 11 Madison. And we were like, okay, we'll go to him and get some advice. So we're talking to him for advice about like, who should we hire? What would be the right person? And one day he just goes, well, why not me? And I was like, well, because you're totally out of our league, and why would you ever work with us? And we have no experience. And so something seemed fishy. But turns out he just loves boats and loves fishing, loves being on the water, and thought it was a really interesting concept. And so somehow we landed this incredible superstar chef right out of the gate, which was very helpful because so our food was good. And somehow I had stumbled on, I don't know how we found any of these people. Like, we're just the luckiest people in this moment. Milk and Honey, which was like a super renowned New York City cocktail bar.
Sure.
The guy ran Milk and Honey and like the manager of Milk and Honey both came to run our beverage program like first year, right out of the gate. So we had this incredible beverage program. We had an incredible person who's still with us today, is now our director of oysters, running our oyster program. And we had an incredible chef who had started 11 Madison as our chef. So like we had this dream team, but we just didn't know what we were doing. So
did you have any money?
What?
Because it all seems very expensive. Did you have money at the time?
We had no money. Like I was a teacher. I sold my architecture firm to my business partners for nothing. I don't know, like $30,000. Like literally, very little money. And we sold our sailing company to our employees for like nothing crazy. And I got married. I was living. It's like I didn't have a lot of money. I had maybe, I don't know, $75,000 of my own personal money. My brother had maybe a little bit more. And then someone gifted us this boat, which was just nuts. And then, it's like a priceless historic ship. And then, credit cards. And I was, fully in debt the day we opened. Like I had some projections so that I could pay for the apartment that I was renting.
Sure.
None of it added up. Like it was
right.
a total gamble, but like I didn't have any responsibilities and we're just, kind of went with it. And we were like as lucky as you could possibly be. There's huge major errors and problems and disasters and everything else. But, big picture, we held it together. We quickly learned some of the fundamentals. And then the cool thing is that we had a seasonal business. So we got through the summer and shut it down. And then we're like, oh shit, there's like 1,000 things we need to figure out how to actually do. So we spent that winter like tinkering and rejiggering, and we rebuilt a bunch of things that they would work because we're actually like floating, and like the boat goes up and down 10 feet every day. And, everything from like, how does the plumbing work? How do the toilets work? Like major logistical things to also like, how does service work? How do we manage people? And like, so we did that for a couple of years and started to get a rhythm. And like it's funny, like the restaurant was pretty wildly successful around us and we're having a great time. But I wouldn't say that we had our chops or like had established, how to function. And then one day I'm on the deck of the boat. It's a beautiful day.
Real quick, before you dig in, I do have a question about that. So like you're a couple of years into the seasonal business, right? And this industry has no shortage of people that are like crushing top line and making absolutely no money on the bottom line.
Yep.
Right. You're like, yep, been there. So like I would assume at the end of the first season, you're like, oh my God, we made so much money. Where did all of it go? Right.
Yeah,
because that's the first job, like it's, the bar was wildly successful. My first venture was like wildly successful from a top line perspective. And then we spent years like refining the process so that we actually kept the money we made. Right.
Yeah, that's the hard part. I mean, it's crazy. That's one thing that my dad said to me very early on. Like my dad is the total opposite of us. Like he's a very conservative, not risk taker, strategic builder of businesses. And we didn't go in like that. And, early on, he goes, like revenue hides a lot of problems, which,
sure.
Is very true. And, luckily we're making enough that it covered, the basics and we're in a fairly okay spot. But also it's like our business, particularly in the beginning and still some to this day, was heavily seasonal, and you're basically a squirrel. Like you need to collect everything and then you need to survive for 6 months or 5 months with no income. So come April, I'm either have like no money or negative money.
Right.
And, that was a real thing that we've been trying to solve for that problem for many years. But, after those first, I think it was after the first, sometime in our second season, this is more stable. It wasn't what I would call totally functional, but we're going. And I was having a drink on the deck, and the guy who ran Ace Hotels was there and told me we're chatting, and he said he was opening a hotel in New Orleans, and they had this building, an old building next to the hotel that they didn't know what to do with. And I said, let me take a look. And it's this beautiful Creole cottage built in the 1830s. And I said, you should let us open an oyster bar. It's our hometown. It's where we're from. Like I think that, we could bring some credibility that just like an outside hotel is not going to do. And he said, all right, well, send me a pitch. So I wrote this sort of manifesto of us coming back to our hometown and doing something great. And, they were into it. So we ended up opening this oyster bar there together called Seaworthy. And that was a huge hit right out of the gate. And we ran that we personally ran it for 3 years. And it won Seafood Restaurant of the Year, like first year in New Orleans, which to me is like, that's the biggest honor possible. Really redeemed my character in my hometown because we're, I don't know, a little bit out of control as kids. So had like a newfound adult respect there, which is always fun. And for us, most importantly, kind of like made us believe like, oh, maybe we kind of have something here that we know what we're doing. And it's not just a fluke that we had this great idea. So from there, we ended up getting another old schooner, like a 140-foot wooden ship, and opened a restaurant in Brooklyn called Pilot. And within the same month, opened a huge, like 30,000 square foot waterfront spot on Governor's Island, which is the island just south of Manhattan. So it overlooks all of downtown Manhattan. So we had 2 big openings, like basically simultaneously, which is pretty insane.
It's insane.
It was insane. And I
Would
remember
you do it again? Was that a good idea?
No, it was not a good idea. And I would say, no, I wouldn't do it again, except for I have done it again and I am doing it again. Yes.
So walk me through that. So, and the reason is, and I think that you're a really great example, in doing a bunch of background research. I think you're a really great example of it takes as much effort to build $1 million business as it does a $100 million business, right? It's the same 80 to 100 hours a
100%.
week. It's the same lifeblood. And so, one of the things that I see as I chart your career, is big swings, really, really big swings. From an outsider's perspective, and I'm sure you hear this a lot. I love everything about your businesses, and there's absolutely nothing that I like about your businesses, right? Because it's like, right, it's hard enough to open in an old building, and you're opening on the water. And so like there are all of these things around it. And so before we get into the rest of the story, what I'm most interested in is, number one, like, what is your relationship with risk? And then number two, like, how do you hedge your bets?
I think that I have established an incredibly high risk tolerance.
I would agree.
I've been through some pretty heavy shit. My first wife passed away, and that was, brutal. But also, and I also I have a 2-year-old now, and he almost died in like a very dramatic, aggressive, fucking terrifying way. And I mean, these are just, things happen to people in life. And, if you can do that stuff and get through that kind of stuff, like, what's a restaurant problem? Yeah, there are real problems. I have real problems every day. And like, honestly, like, I don't read Yelp, but when I used to sometimes read Yelp, like those things would make me feel bad. I'm like, why is this stupid little thing, like someone annoyed, making me feel bad when like there's real things, like there's war and there's people have major life issues. Like I wouldn't say it's just a game. Like I believe in this thing that we're doing, but it's like, we're doing a dance. Like it's a cool performance of life that, we're making something where people have a good time and where we have a good time and where we think we're creating something cool, but like, it doesn't really matter. Like to me, I don't think it matters in like the existential sense of the world. And I've gotten very comfortable with, trying to make cool things. And when we fuck up, we fuck up. And, we haven't totally blown it, and I'm trying not to totally blow it, but I am aware of the fact that there is a time where we might totally blow the whole thing up and like, wow, we went too hard, or that was too big, or that was really stupid. But we're creating this thing for the outside world, for people to experience, but we're also creating this thing for us, which is like exploring ideas that we're into and exploring concepts that we're into and like learning how to do them better. And to me, the process of making it, I've realized, is really the most rewarding part and the part that I find the most interesting and also the most challenging. And I just like doing it. So, is
I
it?
interviewed this guy. His name was Sean Aldridge, and I hear his words in my head like every single day. He owns a bed and breakfast and a couple of restaurant concepts in Chicago. And he said, the best advice I ever got that I give to everyone is don't do anything that could destroy you. Right. Which I know on its face makes a lot of sense. But like when I look at like my biggest professional disasters, it was because like I had just swung too big, right? I hadn't done enough on the front end to mitigate my risk. And in those moments, two come to mind, I absolutely destroyed myself. And so as it relates to risk, I know you're not afraid to take the risk, but do you see it differently? Are you doing things on the back end or the front end to try and mitigate that risk? Does it even seem like a risk, or does it seem like an educated guess?
Well, I don't know for real, honestly. I have two worlds of thinking about this. One world, I remember I was reading the Steve Jobs book, I don't know, 10 years ago. And his whole premise, which I thought was pretty interesting, was that if you think it's possible, it's not a big enough project. And my brother and I used to restore boats, for fun, and also to like, we build them and then sell them and then build a bigger one and sell that. And, it started out like rebuilding a 30-foot boat is like a daunting, scary thing. And now we're at the point where, we're rebuilding, America's oldest yacht. It's like a 180-foot wooden ship that's, priceless and been around the world multiple times. And I'm not scared of that project. And it's like a perspective thing, it's like people who do rock climbing, like sheer wall with little tiny like fingernail holes, like they see how you can get to the end of that, or they feel like they've got a good chance of getting to the end of that. So I just feel more comfortable in stressful and more complicated situations than I used to. And so in some ways, I feel like, I really want to be doing, I just want to be doing the projects that to me don't feel like I understand completely how I can get to the end of it, or else it's just not interesting. Like I know how to open, I don't really, but like I can understand how to open like a simple box restaurant that then you do the same restaurant over and you do it again and you do it again. And that's probably a much more intelligent idea if you just want to make money and have a stable life. Simultaneously, I feel very motivated internally to realize ideas that I have, regardless of whether they're good ideas or bad ideas. Like I have 1,000 bad ideas and I'm just into them and like I want to do them and I'm obsessed about these things. And some typically have like 5 or 6 projects like kind of percolating that are maybe possible. And sometimes just the reality of the world determines which ones of those move forward. Some of them kind of linger and come back in a few years. Like we're not so much hedging risk necessarily because many of our venues are also like independently owned and operated, even though we own all of them. But like, they're siloed in such a way that like if one thing fucks up, everything else isn't gone. I'm sure I could do something publicly that would like bring down our whole company, but I'm planning not to do that. So I don't know. Yeah, there's risks, but we've done some management deals and stuff that are like de-risking in a way because they're just more stable. But then you have to deal with all the stuff that comes along with that, which
That's true.
Other people's feelings and opinions and
which is the worst. It is. Especially in such a subjective industry. Do you think you had a strategic? Do you think you had a strategic advantage in that you were like an outsider coming in? The reason I ask is you seem to have. I think that people always conflate like things being simple with things being easy, which I think something can be simple and not easy, right? Like getting in shape is very simple, but not particularly easy. Um, and so you seem to have a very simple, very clean worldview, which I would assume probably comes from your background as an architect, right? Clean lines, form, focus. How do you think your approach has led you to succeed in an industry, coming in from as an outsider, in an industry that's just wrought with failure?
It's interesting. I don't know one way or the other if it's my perspective, but I think with my brother and I together, we have a very rare and lucky thing in that, I've started businesses before with other people. And I started an architecture firm with my friends, and they were my best friends. And we all had the exact same interest, like design cool things. But I learned later down the road, you shouldn't go into business with someone that has the exact same interest as you, because then who's going to do the payroll, and who's going to do the compliance, and who's going to do the boring shit that
Sure.
nobody wants to do. And like we're all competing to do the one cool part and not the boring part. And that was ultimately, I think, what ended that partnership, is that we all wanted to do the same thing and nobody wanted to do the other stuff. In our restauranting world, my brother and I are very much like a weird Venn diagram together, in that we share a very common central understanding of how things should be. Like the feeling that you want to have and the experiences you want to have. And we were very lucky to grow up in a hospitality family and see like the greats of like the greatest maitre d' you've ever seen, or like the smoothest operator in terms of like running a business. And just like an eye, my dad had this insane eye for detail that's affectionate, like it's a torture device. Like I can't sit anywhere and not see the problem. And it's fine when it's at someone else's restaurant, because I'm like, I just see it.
Sure.
It's great. It's great when I see it there. Like I was talking to Danny Meyer's not like my buddy, but I was talking to him at his restaurant, and a host walked by with a styrofoam cup, drinking out of the straw, like slurping it, and I could see the pain and like
Sure.
shoot through his body. And I just felt like such a win. I was like, yes, like that happens to someone else and it wasn't me. And like, it was great. But my brother just has a different, like, I don't know if it's left brain or right brain, but we both have the opposite side of the brain. Like I'm the one that's like much more like architecture, design, branding, communications, vision, and like communications focused. And he's much more like numbers, compliance, parts of ice machines, like that he just knows in the back of his head. Like, why did we spend this dollar? Why did we spend that dollar? Where's this going? How can we make this more economical? How can we like rejigger the system to make this work better? And we have a very easy communication with each other where, he has an idea, I have an idea. There's like a shorthand, because I've known him for, almost 50 years, that we just make decisions quickly and we're on the same page. And I have implicitly trust him. So like we're able to operate together, where basically like my brother is my hedge against failure, which is pretty good spot to be in. Like I feel very comfortable in almost any situation with him, like a gunfight or a sinking boat, or like how do we solve this restaurant problem, or whatever it's going to be.
Well, I also think you have a really interesting worldview generally. You said that crew isn't just restaurants, it's infrastructure. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, we also, we operate marinas, and we
Right.
restore historic ships. And, crew, basically where we are today is, I think our business model has really evolved to where we take historic properties, either a boat or a building, that are undervalued, or also like a waterfront location that, let's say it has nothing there, but it's could be an incredible spot. And we see that property or piece of infrastructure for what it could be, and we revitalize it or restore it or preserve it, and then try and add some sort of cultural life to that. And, when it works, it's a pretty great model, because they're usually somehow like discounted in a way that other, infrastructure wouldn't be. Like, I don't go out anymore and rent a restaurant space. Like, that's the last thing I've looked around. Like, I wanted to have an oyster bar in the West Village, and I looked around, and, best case scenario, it's $30,000 a month for your, 45 person restaurant. Like, that doesn't add up. Like, you have to have 100% occupancy all the time to make that a viable restaurant. Like, that's why restaurants close all the time. So, we try and have some sort of, it is a strategic advantage, but we're not really going into it like that. We just go into things that were like, this has not been realized. People aren't using this thing, and let's us see if we can bring some of our, sensibility to that and make it be, a vibrant place. So, like, we just bought a building, our first building we ever bought in New Orleans, that, it's built in 1830. They actually used to make ships, like it was a ship supply depot, which is so awesome because it just perfectly on brand, totally accidental. It had a fully built out restaurant on the first and second floor. Like, you couldn't have built it to a higher standard. Super cheesy, but still like well built, nice kitchen. And then 2 beautiful apartments and a totally empty floor in this building. The person who restored it didn't own it, went to jail for money laundering. And it was in this like
such a New Orleans story.
Yeah, like, it was in this no man's land where it's like, who's going to buy this building? Someone who's going to buy it and rent out the restaurant, hopefully, or someone who's going to buy it with a restaurant and like hopefully use the apartments. And so it just languished on the market for like a couple of years until we discovered it, and we got it for nothing. And, it's prime French Quarter real estate where, we're basically stripping out this restaurant and making it feel the way that it should have felt, and making, something that's on brand for us. So, our model really is like seeing the inherent value in a piece of history, or, or knowing the feeling that we want to experience, and then like driving with that, and not leading with like, oh, I have this like financial model that makes sense.
Let's talk about design, because I think it's one of the unique value propositions that you specifically bring to the table. It would be very easy to look at like everything that you've built, and it could have that Pirates of the Caribbean feel to it,
Sure,
right?
That's my paranoia.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
That it is de-evolved into some sort of parody of itself. I owned a bar in Hollywood for like more than a decade. It was called 504. I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. And so like it's everything that we did.
Wait, where was it?
It was on Hollywood Boulevard in between Wilcox and Cherokee.
What years?
2010 through the pandemic.
Okay, you missed me. I was there before that. Yeah.
It's well,
Nice.
had you gone, you would have remembered nothing anyway. We did a very good job. But it was always about like, what did I want it to be? Like, what I wanted it to be is I wanted it to look like a bar in New Orleans, not like a themed bar in New Orleans, right? I wanted it to look like a bar you would walk into in New Orleans, like a legit dive bar. And that's hard to do.
That's
And it's
super
hard to do, right? It's really hard to do because if anything that would fall in line with thematics like Mardi Gras beads and all of that, like we didn't do that shit because like this isn't a costume that the building is wearing, right? It is really trying to transplant this thing from here to there. And so having done it myself 3 times, it is a painful process.
Oh, yeah.
That again, I felt very, very, I felt the same level of paranoia. And so like, how do you do it? How do you do it in a way that is authentic? And how do you do it in a way that is, one of the other things I think you've done really, really well that I would argue I did poorly, is it's very easy to go into one of your places and know you own it without knowing you own it. There are through lines. There are these aesthetic standards that make it really easy to know whether it's your place. I think in New Orleans, I think Robert LeBlanc does a really good job with that.
Yeah, he's great. Super
Right?
talented.
Like you know his shit. You see his shit, and you're like, oh, that's totally something he built. How do you do it?
Definitely. It's funny. So, like on the New Orleans dive bar tip, during COVID, all my restaurants were closed. So it's like running out of. I was already out of money, and my buddy owns Bluestone Lane, which is like a pretty big coffee chain, and he was renting this place that had a basement near where I live, and they had this huge. It used to be a bar in the basement that I liked, but it closed even pre-COVID. And he's like, I don't need this space. It's available. Do you want it? And I went to look at it, and we ended up negotiating this crazy deal. And my wife's like, you need a project. Like, this is what you're going to do now. Like, just go there, get out of the house. Like, you're going crazy. And so I had just had a baby, and I would just take my little baby in the chest back there, put him in his bouncer. And like, we spent a year, like that year of COVID, just building this place out. And like, we basically built it. Michael, who was our, he built everything with us, and he's very very good designer too. Like, we effectively designed this together on the fly of like, I wanted to do a New Orleans dive bar. I was like, that's what I want to do. But also all the same problems you said, like you can't fake that, and you can't, I mean, also it's in like Tribeca, like the most expensive neighborhood in New York City. Like, I can't have like a fake dive bar.
Right.
But I want a bar that feels the way I felt when I would be drunk wandering through a bar in New Orleans. And I tried to design it from that sensibility of like, how do you actually, like, what do you want to happen when you're in the bar? Like, you want to meet someone, you want to make out, like, you want to like wander around and see what else is happening. Like, maybe you want to get in a fight, or like, maybe, you want something to happen. Like, you don't want to just go somewhere and sit there. So I just really thought about it like through the narrative. And then I tried to make these narrative zones like, okay, this is the zone where this kind of happens, and this is the zone where this happens. And I tried to make it so you can like go on a circuit. And like, I've got some, low level theories on bars, but like a circuit is really like one of them that I think is pretty interesting. Like, to be able to have somewhere to go and not just like sit there. It's like when you're at a party, you're like, oh, maybe we'll go to this other room and like see what's happening in there. And then I tried to give those rooms, build them in a way that felt authentic to boats, felt authentic to New Orleans, felt authentic to my sensibilities. And then I had a huge art collection of the most random, like, hoarder shit you could ever imagine. Like, from real art made by people that I respect. And like, I had like some mentors that were artists that give me like real pieces, down to like stupid stuff that my friends made, down to like maritime paintings. And I just have kind of an eclectic taste. And I just put that stuff on the walls in a way that to me felt like it meant something. And I would start to put it up, and then sometimes I'd go home and like beat myself up, like, oh, I just made a Cracker Barrel. It's like so depressing. And like, I would lose sleep over it, and I'd feel like a loser. And I mean, it was funny because I would just beat myself up, and I'd go back the next day, take it all down, and like put up other things until I kind of figured out a relationship there of all the stuff that feels like it actually tells a story and it's not a one-liner. Like, it doesn't look like Margaritaville, or it doesn't look like it's a hokey, like, we sell seafood, so here's a picture of a fish. Like, there's everything from like a Picasso to like some family photos to like me passed out on the floor of a bar. Like, there's just real stuff from our lives. Like, there's my dining room table from being a kid, like, is in the restaurant. It's all real stuff. And I think at a certain point, there's a resonance to that starts to take on layers and feel authentic. Like, to me, when I go there now, it still doesn't feel done, but most people seem to think that it feels good and feels like a real place and feels like, something unique that has its own character, which is where I want it to get to. Funnily enough, we're in the midst of buying this bar that is one of my favorite bars I've ever been to, that is an old school nautical dive, like a legit old school nautical dive that I fantasized about when we were making the bar. And I was like, yeah, now it's just already done.
That's amazing.
Don't have to add anything. So
let me ask you about, so I would argue that the biggest hurdle my entire career has always been focus, right? That whatever I'm focused on improves. And so when I focus on 30 things, nothing improves. And so it's a question that I like to ask, a question that I ask myself constantly is like, how do you delineate between an opportunity and a distraction? When are you actually creating more opportunity for yourself and more money for yourself and generational wealth for yourself? And when are you just creating more work, more
I'm
distractions.
terrible at this. I
But
can't help anyone at this point. Like I have so many things that I want to do and so many bars that I want to open and so many projects. And like, we're literally on a conservative number. We're opening 4 places right now in the broader like world of possibilities. There's like 10 things kind of floating around, and we don't have some big strategic roadmap. We're trying to do less dinky things that are not impactful. And we're trying to do things that we really believe in, that we think are cool. And so that is one, driver of the like focus of our company. But I am terrible at like, oh, what if we just had like a little like 3-seat sad country bar, which is the worst idea, but also like my dream. So
sure.
I'm easily distracted by that stuff. But right now I have, like I was saying, when I got home from work yesterday, I was like, it was just like a fire hose to the face of problems and craziness and all this stuff. And you can only even accomplish so many things in that day. So I just try and tick off like the 3 biggest, most important things of whatever they're going to be that day. And, lots of stuff's falling through cracks or falling by the wayside and not getting responded to. And, hopefully those things aren't important, but, probably some of them are. We'll see.
How do you make sure you're not doing bullshit? I mean, by that, what I mean is, I've always been a people pleaser. It's one of the reasons like I came up through this industry. Also, I think growing up in Southern Louisiana, you're always kind of heavily informed by the industry, whether you land in it or not. But one of the things that has always kept me up at night is like doing bullshit work, like not meeting the expectations, the grand expectations that I've set for myself and the people that give me money. I've always been one to read all of my online reviews. And like when I get a negative one, even if it's like bullshit, I always think like, fuck, like that person means that. Right.
Sure.
Like it's right. Like it's not because like I've never left an online review ever for anything ever. And like this person not only took time out of their life to give me money, they're now taking time out of their life to like shit on me publicly. And it's because like they think it's true. And so like I am always like leveraging expectations, trying to set them really high and trying to exceed. And I think one of the big differences between us is like you figured out how to do multiple things at the same time and do them in an excellent way. Whereas, go ahead.
I'm not going anywhere.
But like I can just do one thing better than anyone else in the world. Like that is my lot in life. How do you do many things very well? I read your online reviews, bro. By and large, people are very happy with you.
The reality is, all of the things that we're doing, I have so much more that I want to be doing for each one that I'm not able to do because we're doing others. Like I was talking to someone last night. I have 3 kids, and we're talking about like what happens when you have 4 kids and 5 kids, and it's basically you just like have less time and love, not less love, but you have less time to give to each one. And I am truly in a state where I have 10 restaurants and I have less time to give to each one and less attention to give to each one. Like on one hand, we've developed a really, really good team, and I trust everyone on our team like deeply, and I know that they all believe in what we're doing, which is huge. But still, there's just stuff that only one person can do or only someone else can do, and there's all these places, and there's like things are not getting done that I would love to do, and that's just the reality. And you have to accept it to some level that it's not always going to be perfect. It's not going to be, if you want to do more things, you have to like dial back the attention to certain little things. It's just, it's tough reality. And I hate that. So, I wake up in the middle of the night and do, I think some of the stupid shit, like curate the art that's going to go on the walls inside of Grand Banks where it doesn't need new art, but like we could, and I want to, so we do. But like, that's the kind of stuff that like, there's no time for that. There's no space for it. And I don't read the reviews anymore. Like when I get a good review, it doesn't affect me any way whatsoever. I think, of course that's how it should be. Like we should have a good review. When I read a bad review, it completely destroys my day. And like, I feel terrible. and whether or not it's right or not. So it doesn't matter.
Right. Same. Because it's true. It's not true to me, but it's true to them. It's true to
I don't
whoever
go there
wrote it.
anymore. But I did have this one guy who was so awesome our first year. I used to respond to them, and he wrote this review about how he came to Grand Banks and he was pissed because we didn't have bread with our oysters. And I wrote him back a thing explaining, like, we're on a boat. We have a super small kitchen. Like, bread will not survive in our kitchen. It's just not functionally viable. And then he wrote back, and the seaweed and the oysters, it was made out of plastic. And I was like, it's not made out of plastic. Like, we buy real seaweed unnecessarily to like put in our ice because it helps like maintain the consistency of the ice and it feels nice. And just wouldn't let this one go. And then 8 or 9 years later, followed up on the review. Like, just want to like reiterate that it's seaweed in the oysters. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try a different approach here. I was like, hey man, so great to hear from you. A lot's been going on in the last 9 years. Here's some life updates from me. Like, this is what's happened in my life. What's been going on with you? And it's just like silence. It's like a person who's got this anger. I don't understand. Like, I can't put myself in that mind space to feel like I need to write a review or follow up years later. But
same. I haven't even reviewed my own restaurants. You know what I mean? And if I was going to start, that is probably where I would start. And I would give me amazing reviews. I want to ask about growth, like knowing where you are now, like where are you going next? Is it more on a plotted trajectory? Is it more for more's sake? I think these are all the questions that we ask ourselves, like quietly, internally, intentionally. How do you look at growth over the course of the next 5 to 10 years? What does winning look like?
I mean, I think I've come to the realization that there is no winning, and it's about being in it and enjoying it while you're in it. Like, it was funny. I read the Keith McNally biography, which I really enjoyed, but also I was frustrated that there wasn't enough on the restaurants. Like, it wasn't really ever about the restaurants.
Sure.
And, what's funny is he's had, a stellar career, as good as you could ever imagine. And in many ways, like, the failures hurt and the wins feel good, but it's all kind of ephemeral. It comes and it goes, and it doesn't, in the big picture, like, he's a successful restaurateur, but like, you still have all the feelings that you're going to have one way or the other. Like, you're going to feel like shit some days, you're going to feel great, you're going to feel like you're really knocking it out of the park. I don't think that ever goes away. And, my goals now are I can't imagine that I would make another restaurant then like, oh, that's it. It's like, now I'm successful. Or I would like, we're trying to build our company so that it's like endures, so that it's stable. And we're trying to do projects that we think are awesome because we just like making cool things. And we like the process of making the things, and we like the process of operating them and being in them and experiencing them with people. And I just want to keep doing that. And, we've been pretty lucky in that, we've had some successes, and those tend to lead to more cool, interesting things that I never thought we'd get to do. I just kind of want to keep doing it. I want to be able to keep doing this, and I want to be able to, be old and still have a job and show up to work. Like, I don't want to retire. I want to be there when I'm 80 and like hang out and say hi to people and hold court and like maybe have less bullshitty issues when I'm, in 10 years, but that's about it.
When you look at how you spend your time today, and you look at 2026, like, I don't know about you, but like Q4 for me is always about planning, and it's always about like planning a few different things. How much money do I want to make? What do I want to do to make that money? How do I want to spend my time? Where do I want to spend my time? I'm catching it at a really interesting time because we're at the tail end of a year that has been great for some people and terrible for others. When you take inventory, what's going to be different about 2026 in your mind from you as a person, as an operator, as an owner, as an entrepreneur?
I think I'm going to get my ass kicked harder in 2026. I really we've got 3 big openings upcoming, and I'm super excited about all of them. And they're like dream projects for me. I'm opening a restaurant in New Orleans that is like full life dream, like a restaurant that I fully own in the French Quarter to do whatever we want with. And, to make it as wild and debaucherous and fun and alive as you can make a place. And, it's a very personal project for us. And then I'm opening, we're buying this old dive bar, which, in some ways feels like not a heavy lift, but it's all, even when it seems like not a heavy lift, obviously that's when it's going to
For
be
sure.
a heavy
How
lift.
hard can it be?
Yeah, exactly. And then, I'm opening another boat restaurant also next year on an old fireboat that we restored, which is awesome. And, that just has huge unknowns to it. Like when you open a restaurant, particularly a restaurant like some of ours where they're non-conventional, there's just things you don't know. It's like the flow may or may not make sense. Like the service model may or may not make sense. Like spatially, how people use it, like things change. So I just foresee a lot of problem solving and a lot of, highs. And frankly, I'm like fairly addicted to the whole restaurant building, opening thing. It's like kind of being a drug addict in some weird way. Like there's a real high and then a real low, and
Sure.
I can too. Like the day after we open, I'm always super depressed because I just like, we did it. And then now what? Now then, okay, you have to keep going. But like the fun, exciting build-up part of like putting all this stuff together is over. So I don't know. I don't think my life's going to be fundamentally that different next year. It's just going to be, abusive until July. And then hopefully I can take a deep breath and go to the beach for a couple of days and then get back to it. So.
And then I would think the biggest hurdle to growth has probably always been people, right? You can always find money. It's really hard to find people. There's no way that you've grown to the scale you've grown to without getting really good at finding best in class people across multiple markets. What is that approach? What do you think in an industry where there's a massive labor shortage still to this day and everybody's struggling to acquire the same talent? Dude, I get like a million texts a month being like, hey, do you know a GM? Do you know any GMs looking for work?
Yeah, sure.
Right. And it's like everybody's looking for the same thing. How do you acquire talent? And what do you think is your unique value proposition that drives that?
I mean, I think this is a huge area that we have realized is the fundamental thing behind our business is the people. It took some time obviously when you say it, it makes sense, but like, I didn't know functionally that you just couldn't hire people and then train them to do the jobs. And like, now we hire this year we had 500 something employees. Next year, we're going to have 600 something employees. And every single one of those people matters. Any person in any role can cause like immeasurable damage to the company. And also just having that many people means that you have like exponentially more life reality issues. Someone dies, someone's cousin is sick, someone has a baby, like something happens all the time. And like, those are the, easy ones, but like there's HR things and like just stuff spirals, like the more people you have. So we have really gotten extra diligent about making sure that my brother and I meet every single person that has and interview every single person that has any sort of leadership role in any aspect of the company, which sounds obvious, but like there's 50 of those people and we're hiring them constantly. So, but I want to be sure that all of those people are decent human beings, first and foremost, that have a vision and a goal, and those goals align with what we want to do together. And, we treat people well, like we're actually, care about the people that we work with. So, whenever you're in a leadership position, someone was saying this to me last night, whenever you're in any kind of managerial position, you're always like an asshole, no matter what, like right off the bat, like to anyone else, you're an asshole, but it's like, what grade of an asshole are you going to be? So I think we're like the lowest grade asshole available. And, I truly love many of the people that are in our company and like make choices for the business to be supportive of those people. Like I don't do certain things so that people in our company, even if they're like financially beneficial or, it might be good for my ego or something, I will choose not to do this thing to maintain the positivity within our corporate group so that we can, have the stability of this team and grow together. And I've learned, I was talking to a friend of mine who owns like I don't know, 150 restaurants or something. And, they're all like chain restaurants, but still he's, runs this massive enterprise. And I had brought on someone in a leadership role from like an external person into a leadership role, and it just wasn't a good cultural fit. And we're talking about this. And he said, yeah, I don't have anyone on my leadership team that hasn't been with us for 10 years. And, really struck a chord with me. And I started to realize like all of our best people started as a bartender, a reservationist. And, all of a sudden they're reservationists running events. And then all of a sudden they're like the director of HR. And then all of a sudden they're, like a VP. It's just our entire leadership team now have really tried to make it clear that we just build from within. And we find the people who seem like they have the drive and the energy to be in this industry, which is super challenging industry, and like a love for it, and then nurture those personalities and try and, keep them on our team. It's, it's really like brutal when you lose one of those people that is good. So like for us, that's our only way to grow. Like I'm maxed out. I have no more bandwidth. I got an assistant so that I can have like 10 more minutes of bandwidth a day to like focus on serious things. But it's just, it's really about building a great team for sure.
And if we could agree, it's my last question for you. If we could agree that there aren't successful people, they're just successful behaviors. And the people that exhibit those behaviors, they have a tendency to do well in life. What should we steal from you? What are the successful behaviors, the tactics, the tools, the strategies that have served you well that we could internalize to benefit us?
I mean, I think the two things that and it's been learned too. Like when I started running restaurants, which as I mentioned was total accident, I would come in I would see something, I'd come in so hot, like I'd see an issue and I'd just find the first person, fix that issue. And then I'd see another issue, I'd find the next person, fix that issue. And it just like, I was, I didn't know how to manage all the problems and feelings and complexity of everything. And over time, I just effectively trained myself on how to be in this. And I think the two things that I have gotten pretty good at in my old age as a restaurant operator is to be nice to everybody and like authentically nice to, from every, security person, janitor that I work with, whether they work for me, with us, or just in a building that we're in or anywhere. I'm just like, I'm friends with every single person in an authentic way. And I'm, very comfortable with, CEOs and billionaires and like the various people that we have to like, our city officials that I have to engage with. I am just a nice person to them because every single person out there in the world is walking around with tons of shit that they're dealing with. And nobody needs problems. Nobody needs someone who's pissed. Like you want to be a person that brings light to someone's life or at least makes their life a little easier or like adds a little bit of joy to their day. And, the same way that a restaurant should. Like when I engage with people, I make it a positive experience. And it's like my natural drive to do that, but I really focus on, even when I'm not in a good place, like trying to exude that positive energy and situation. And I think that, without being a new agey person about it, really has an effect. Like when we opened Grand Banks, there was 20 reasons why it wasn't legally or physically or functionally or financially possible to open it. And we just went to every agency and every person and we're just the nice guys. Like I went to the fire department, I met the fire chief, and we're just the nice guys, talked to the fire chief for 5 hours about his life. And at the end of the day, when the inspector showed up, it's a super nice guy who likes fishing in boats. It's like we really put that effort in to be kind. And like, even when you're getting kicked in the face, just smile and say, I understand. And I appreciate, where you're coming from, and like be friends with the people that are even your enemies in the situation. That's one side. The other side is just do the things. Like most people don't. They talk about it, they think about it, they make a business plan, they have all these, like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start an LLC, like, just go do the job, like, whatever it is. Like, we just do it. And it sounds like really stupid, but we just actually make moves to open restaurants. We do the work. It's super hard. It's not possible. We find a way to get over those humps, and we just like actually do the work. And I think that is really the biggest stumbling block to almost everything. and just the realization that you can make things in the world, whatever it is. Like, I now feel very comfortable with the idea that I could go start a tech company. I could open a hotel. Like, I could run a laundromat. Like, I don't know anything about these businesses, but nobody knows anything about these businesses. There's no expert on laundromats. You just figure out the things that are fundamental to that industry or whatever it is and convince people that you know enough about it, and you start doing it. And, that's been very helpful for us. And like, now we have some credibility, which helps add to that. But, at the beginning, I didn't have any credibility. Like, we're just two dudes with a stupid idea. And, we pursued that idea pretty religiously until it became real.